The crystal halls of the Zephyrian archive shimmered with ancient light as Keeper Vextai ran her six-fingered hand along the glowing data streams. For 3,000 years, her kind had maintained the greatest library in the known galaxy, a repository of wisdom from 10,000 civilizations. But today something was wrong. "The patterns are shifting," she whispered to her assistant, a young keeper named Zolran whose silver scales rippled with anxiety. "The probability matrices, they're all converging on a single point in time." Zolran leaned closer to the floating holographic displays. Numbers cascaded like waterfalls of light, each one representing the fate of entire star systems. "What does it mean, Keeper?" Vexitai's three eyes narrowed as she focused on the central prediction core. The ancient machine had never been wrong, not once in its millennia of operation. It had predicted the fall of the Arcturus Empire, the plague that consumed the spiral worlds, even the birth of the great cosmic storms that still raged in the outer rim. "It means," she said slowly, "that the old warnings were true." The chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of the quantum processors. Deep in the archive's memory banks, buried beneath layers of forgotten languages and dead civilizations, lay a collection of texts that most keepers dismissed as primitive superstition. They spoke of a species that would one day emerge from a small blue world in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. The warnings called them humans. "Impossible," Zolran breathed, accessing the restricted files. "These are just myths, stories told by dying races to frighten their children." But as the predictions grew stronger, as the probability streams focused like a laser on the third planet of an average yellow star, Vextai felt a chill run through her crystalline bones. The warnings weren't myths at all. They were prophecies. "Alert, the Council of Worlds," she commanded, her voice echoing through the vast chamber. "Tell them the humans are coming." Far across the galaxy, on a world called Earth, a species that barely knew how to leave their own atmosphere was taking their first tentative steps toward the stars. They had no idea that their mere existence was about to change everything. Chapter 2. The Council's Dismissal. The Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council buzzed with the voices of 100 different species. Representatives from across known space had gathered on the neutral world of Concordia, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, telepathic pulses, and translated speech. At the center of the Great Dome sat Chancellor Mordak, his reptilian, features carved from living stone, his ancient eyes having witnessed the rise and fall of empires. Around him, the most powerful beings in the galaxy debated matters of trade, territorial disputes, and resource allocation. But today, an unusual request had been made. "The floor recognizes Keeper Vextai of the Zephyrian Archive," Chancellor Mordak announced, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic enhancement field. A murmur ran through the assembly as Vextai glided forward, her translucent form shimmering in the chamber's light. The keepers rarely involved themselves in political matters, preferring to remain neutral observers of galactic events. "Honored representatives," she began, her words translated instantly into 100 languages. "I come before you with a warning from the deepest archives of recorded history." Ambassador Thisela of the Hegemony leaned forward, her tentacles writhing with amusement. "What ancient ghost stories trouble the keepers now?" "The emergence of a species known as humans," Vextai replied, ignoring the dismissive laughter that rippled through the chamber. "They originate from a world called Earth in the Sol system of the Orion Arm." General Krasvin of the Dominion Warfleet banged his armored fist on his hover seat. "We know of this species. Primitive mammals who have barely learned to split the eye. Atom, they pose no threat to anyone." "That's precisely what makes them dangerous," Vextai insisted. "The warnings speak of their unpredictability, their refusal to follow established patterns of civilization." Chancellor Mordak raised a scaled hand for silence. "What exactly do these warnings predict?" Vextai's form brightened as she accessed her data streams. Holographic images filled the chamber, star charts, probability cascades, and ancient texts written in scripts so old that few could read them. "They speak of a species that defies logic," she said. "Beings who will charge into battle against impossible odds, who will sacrifice themselves for strangers, who will treat enemies as potential friends and find hope in the darkest circumstances." More laughter echoed through the chamber. Ambassador Thistela's tentacles rippled with mirth. "You describe saints, not conquerors. How could such a species threaten anyone?" "Because," Vextai said quietly, "they don't follow our rules." High Admiral Zelnoth of the combined fleets rose from his seat, his cybernetic implants gleaming. "I've reviewed the tactical assessments of this species. They fight with projectile weapons and chemical explosives. Their fastest ships take decades to travel between their own planets. They would last minutes against any of our forces." "The warnings don't speak of their weapons," Vextai replied. "They speak of their nature." She activated another hologram, this one showing the primitive spacecraft humanity had launched into their own system. Crude rockets and metal capsules that looked like toys compared to the elegant vessels that now surrounded Concordia. "Look at their exploration patterns," she urged. "Other species develop interstellar travel through gradual expansion, following resources and safe routes. But humans? They aim for the impossible. They dream of reaching the stars while their feet are still muddy from their homeworld," General Krasvin snorted, a sound like grinding metal. "Dreams don't conquer galaxies, Keeper, don't they?" Vextai challenged. "Every civilization here began with someone who dreamed of more than what they had. The difference is that humans dream bigger than they are." The chamber fell into an uncomfortable silence. Chancellor Mordak's ancient eyes studied the data streams, his expression unreadable. "Even if your warnings contain some truth," he said finally, "this species is confined to their own system. They pose no immediate threat. The Council has more pressing matters to address." "But the predictions show possibilities. Nothing more," Ambassador Thistela interrupted. "I propose we table this discussion until these humans actually demonstrate the ability to leave their home system." A vote was called. By overwhelming margin, the Council chose to dismiss the warnings. As academic curiosities, only a handful of representatives, mostly from smaller worlds on the Galactic Rim, voiced any concern. As the session ended and the delegates dispersed to their ships, Vextai remained floating in the empty chamber, her form dim with worry. "They'll remember this day," she whispered to herself. "When the humans come calling, they'll remember that we tried to warn them." Above Concordia, the first human probe to leave the Sol system drifted silently through the void, its primitive instruments faithfully recording everything they encountered. It would be decades before its signals reached home, but already it carried something that no other species had ever brought to the stars. It carried human curiosity, and in the vast library of the Zephyrian archive, ancient warning texts pulsed with renewed energy as probability streams aligned with prophetic certainty. The time of humanity was beginning. Chapter 3. First Contact. 57 years after the Council's dismissal, Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Endeavour, humanity's first faster-than-light vessel. The ship was a patchwork of human ingenuity, part brute force engineering, part desperate innovation, and part pure stubborn refusal to accept limitations. "Jump successful, Captain," reported Lieutenant Commander Singh from the navigation station. "We're now somewhere completely new." Elena smiled despite the magnitude of what they'd just accomplished. 3 months ago, humanity had finally cracked the FTL barrier using a drive system that horrified the universe's physicists. Instead of elegant manipulation of space-time like other species used, humans had essentially punched a hole in reality and climbed through. "Any signs of civilization?" she asked. "Scanning now," replied Dr. Chen from the science station. "Wait, Captain, I'm detecting artificial structures in this system, large ones." The main screen flickered to life, revealing a sight that took Elena's breath away. Massive space stations orbited a gas giant, their surfaces gleaming with technologies beyond human understanding. Ships moved between them, vessels so graceful they looked like living creatures swimming through the void. "My God," whispered Commander Torres, the ship's first officer. "We're not alone." "No," Elena said quietly. "We're definitely not." The communications array crackled to life, filled with signals in languages that their computers couldn't even begin to translate. The universal translator, hastily installed before launch, struggled to make sense of the alien chatter. Then, suddenly, silence. One of the alien vessels, a sleek craft that dwarfed the Endeavor, was approaching at impossible speed. "Captain," Singh called out, his voice tight with tension. "They're hailing us." Elena straightened her uniform and nodded to the communications officer. On screen. The image that appeared made several crew members gasp. The alien was beautiful, in an otherworldly way, tall, elegant, with 4 arms and skin that shifted color like an oil slick. When it spoke, the universal translator rendered its words in crisp English. "Unknown vessel, you have entered the territorial space of the collective. Identify yourself and state your purpose." Elena stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth ship Endeavor. We're explorers from the planet Earth, and this is our first contact with anyone." The alien's expression shifted. Surprise, curiosity, and something that might have been alarm. "Did you say Earth? From the Sol system?" "Yes." "Is that significant?" For a long moment, the alien was silent. In the background, Elena could hear rapid communication in untranslated languages. When the being looked back at the screen, its demeanor had completely changed. "Captain Vasquez," it said carefully. "I am Sub-Commander Veltar of the Collective, Border Guard. I'm afraid I must ask you to remain in your current position while I contact my superiors." The transmission ended, leaving the Endeavor's crew in stunned silence. "That didn't sound like a warm welcome," Torres muttered. Elena nodded grimly. "Dr. Chen, run full passive scans on everything in this system. I want to know what we're dealing with. Singh, plot escape vectors back to the jump point." "Captain," Chen called out after several minutes of intense scanning, "you need to see this." The main screen showed a tactical overlay of the system. The space stations weren't just impressive, they were fortifications. Weapon platforms bristled from every surface, and the graceful ships were actually warships of devastating power. "This isn't a trade hub," Elena realized. "It's a military outpost. And judging by their positioning," Torres added, studying the tactical display, "they're guarding against something coming from our direction." The implications hit the crew like a physical blow. Humanity's first step into the larger galaxy had brought them face to face with what appeared to be a militarized border, one that seemed specifically designed to keep threats from Earth's region of space contained. "Captain," the communications officer reported, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. They're bringing weapons online." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Whatever humanity's reputation in the galaxy, it clearly wasn't. "Good. Open a channel," she commanded. "All frequencies." "Captain, I wouldn't recommend." "Do it." The channel opened, and Elena broadcast on every frequency the Endeavor could manage. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez to all ships and stations in this system. We come in peace. We're not here to threaten anyone. We're explorers, not conquerors." The response came not from Sub-Commander Veltar, but from a different voice, older, more authoritative. "Captain Vasquez, this is Fleet Commander Zalneth. I don't know what game you're playing, but humans do not come in peace. Our archives are quite clear about your species' nature." Elena felt her blood run cold. "Commander, I don't understand. What archives? This is humanity's first contact with alien civilization." "First contact?" The alien's laugh was bitter. "Captain, your species was identified as a galactic threat nearly 60 years ago. We've been preparing for your inevitable expansion ever since." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Elena's mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. "Commander," she said slowly, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. We don't even have faster-than-light travel except for this one experimental ship. We're not expanding anywhere. And yet, Commander Zalneth replied, "Here you are." Elena was about to respond when Dr. Chen's urgent voice cut through the tension. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple jump signatures, big ones." The tactical display lit up with new contacts. A fleet of alien warships dropping out of FTL around the Endeavor. They were surrounded. Commander Zalneth's image reappeared on the screen, his expression grim. "Captain Vasquez, by order of the Galactic Council, you and your vessel are hereby detained pending determination of human intentions in this sector." "Commander, please," Elena pleaded. "Whatever you think you know about humanity, you're wrong. We're not here to hurt anyone." "That," Zalneth replied, "is exactly what the warning said you would say." As alien ships closed in around the Endeavor, Elena realized that humanity's first contact with galactic civilization had gone catastrophically wrong. Somewhere in the galaxy's vast archives, ancient warnings about her species had been taken as gospel truth. The only question now was whether she and her crew would live long enough to prove those warnings false, or discover that they were terrifyingly accurate. Chapter 4. The Truth Revealed. 3 days into her detention aboard the collective flagship Nemesis, Captain Elena Vasquez was beginning to understand the scope of humanity's reputation problem. Admiral Keithara, the station's commanding officer, had reluctantly agreed to a formal hearing, but the proceedings felt more like a trial than a diplomatic meeting. "The evidence is overwhelming," declared Prosecutor Velnask, his crystalline form pulsing with indignant light. "The archives clearly state that humans are unpredictable, violent, and prone to impossible actions." Elena sat in what could charitably be called the defendant's chair, surrounded by representatives from dozens of species. The universal translator worked overtime, converting the cacophony of alien languages into something resembling a coherent discussion. "With respect," Elena interjected, "could someone please explain what exactly these archives say about my species? Because I'm starting to think there's been a massive misunderstanding." Admiral Keithara, a being that looked like a fusion of octopus and starfish, gestured with several tentacles toward a holographic display. Ancient texts appeared, written in scripts that seemed to shift and change as Elena watched. "These are the warnings of the ancients," the Admiral explained. "Prophecies recorded by civilizations that have since passed into memory. They speak of a species from a blue world that will emerge to challenge the established order of the galaxy." Elena leaned forward, studying the translated text. What she read made her stomach sink. "They will fight when victory is impossible," she read aloud. "They will sacrifice themselves for strangers. They will turn enemies into allies through sheer bloody-minded stubbornness." "Exactly," Prosecutor Velnask said triumphantly. "Clearly, describing a species of dangerous fanatics. Or," Elena said quietly, "describing people trying to do the right thing." The chamber erupted in what might charitably be called laughter, though it sounded more like a zoo at feeding time. "The right thing?" Admiral Keithara's tentacles writhed with what Elena was learning to recognize as alien amusement. "Captain, your species hasn't even been tested yet. You have no idea what you're capable of." "Then test us," Elena said, standing up despite the guard's disapproving clicks. "If you're so convinced we're dangerous, put us in a situation where we can prove." Otherwise, the laughter died instantly. The alien representatives looked at each other with expressions that the universal translator couldn't quite capture. But Elena got the distinct impression she'd just said something either very brave or very stupid. Admiral Keithara's many eyes focused on Elena with uncomfortable intensity. "Captain, are you formally requesting a trial of intent?" Elena had no idea what that meant, but she was out of options. "If it means proving that humanity isn't what you think we are, then yes." The chamber fell silent except for the hum of life. Support systems. Finally, Admiral Keithara spoke. "Very well. The trial of intent is hereby invoked. Captain Vasquez, you and your crew will be placed in a scenario designed to test your species' true nature. The outcome will determine humanity's standing in the galactic community." "What kind of scenario?" Elena asked. Though she wasn't sure, she wanted to know. That, the Admiral replied, will be revealed when the trial begins. 6 hours later, Elena found herself back aboard the Endeavour, but something was wrong. The ship was moving under alien control, heading toward a system that registered as nothing but empty space on their sensors. "Captain," Commander Torres reported, from the tactical station, "I'm detecting massive gravitational anomalies ahead." The main screen flickered to life, revealing something that defied description. Space itself seemed to be torn open, revealing a wound in reality that hurt to look at directly, and emerging from that wound— "Dear God," Dr. Chen whispered, "what is that thing?" The creature, if it could be called that, was the size of a small moon, its surface covered in what looked like both organic tissue and mechanical components. It moved through space without any visible means of propulsion, leaving a trail of distorted reality in its wake. "It's heading for that colony," Lieutenant Singh reported, his voice tight with horror. Elena looked at the tactical display and felt her blood freeze. The monster's trajectory would take it directly through a small solar system where, according to their sensors, several million beings lived on a handful of inhabited worlds. Admiral Kithara's voice crackled over the comm system. "Captain Vasquez, meet the Devourer. It's an ancient weapon from a long-dead civilization, programmed to consume all life it encounters. It's been dormant for 1,000 years, but something has awakened it." "Why are you showing us this?" Elena demanded. "Because," the Admiral replied, "this is your test. The colony worlds below cannot be evacuated in time. Their defense fleet consists of 3 outdated patrol ships. By all logical analysis, those people are already dead." Elena stared at the tactical display, her mind racing. The Devourer was massive, powerful, and apparently unstoppable. The Endeavour, even with humanity's crude but effective weapons, wouldn't even register as a threat to something that size. "What exactly are you expecting us to do?" she asked. "Whatever humans do when faced with impossible situations," Admiral Kithara replied. "The archives suggest your species has a unique approach to hopeless circumstances." Elena looked around her bridge crew, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. They were going to die. Everyone knew it. The smart thing would be to surrender, to accept that some situations couldn't be won. But Elena was human, which meant she was genetically incapable of accepting the smart thing. "All hands battle stations," she commanded. "Torres, I want every weapon we have ready to fire. Singh, plot an intercept course for that thing." "Captain," Dr. Chen protested, "our weapons can't possibly—" "I know," Elena cut him off, "but we're going to try anyway." As the Endeavour accelerated toward the Devourer, Elena opened a channel to the alien observers. "Admiral, I want you to watch carefully, because you're about to learn what humans really are." The ancient creature sensed the approaching ship and turned its attention toward this tiny irritant. Weapons that could crack planets began charging with malevolent energy. Elena smiled grimly. "Sometimes," she said to her crew, "being too stupid to know when you're beaten is its own kind of strength." The Endeavour opened fire, its primitive but determined weapons reaching out toward an enemy that should have been impossible to defeat. In the observation ships surrounding the battle, alien representatives watched in fascination and growing horror as they realized the warnings hadn't been talking about humanity's weaknesses at all. They'd been talking about their most terrifying strength, the unwillingness to give up. Epilogue. The new understanding, 3 months after the Battle of the Devourer, as historians would later call it, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. But this time, the human delegation sat not as prisoners but as the newest members of the galactic community. Captain Elena Vasquez, now Ambassador Vasquez, stood before the same assembly that had dismissed Keeper Vexitai's warnings decades earlier. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The humans didn't destroy the Devourer, Admiral Kithara reported to the assembly. That would have been impossible with their limited weapons. Instead, they did something we hadn't considered. Holographic. Displays showed the battle from multiple angles. The Endeavour, laughably small compared to its opponent, had charged directly at the ancient weapon with no regard for its own survival. "They rammed it?" Ambassador Thisila asked, her tentacles coiled with disbelief. "They tried to," Elena replied, with a slight smile. "Our ship broke apart before impact, but that wasn't the point." Chancellor Mordak leaned forward, his ancient eyes focused intently on the human ambassador. "Then what was the point?" Elena activated her own holographic display, showing the crucial moments of the battle. "While we were attacking, my science officer Dr. Chen was analyzing the creature's structure. He discovered that it wasn't just a weapon, it was a prison." The assembly fell silent as the display showed energy signatures deep within the Devourer's core. "There were beings trapped inside it," Elena continued. "Thousands of them absorbed over millennia but somehow still alive. Our attack wasn't meant to destroy the creature. It was meant to wake up its prisoners." The display showed the moment when the Devourer's internal structure began to collapse, not from external damage, but from internal rebellion. The absorbed civilizations, given hope by humanity's impossible attack, had found the strength to fight. Back from within, the creature destroyed itself, General Krasvin said slowly, "from the inside out, and freed 3,000 years' worth of absorbed civilizations in the process," Elena added. "They're already beginning to rebuild their societies." Keeper Vexitai, now elevated to the position of chief archivist, glided forward. "This is precisely what the warnings predicted. Humans don't fight the way others fight. They find solutions where no solutions should exist." Elena nodded respectfully to the keeper. "The warnings weren't wrong about us being unpredictable, but they weren't describing a threat, they were describing a response to threats." Chancellor Mordak's scaled features cracked what might have been a smile. "You're saying that humans are dangerous to dangerous things." "We're saying," Elena replied, "that humans don't know when to quit. That can be a problem for tyrants and monsters, but for people who just want to live their lives in peace, we're the neighbors you want to have." The vote to admit humanity to the Galactic Council was unanimous, though several representatives noted that it was less about welcoming humans than about making sure they were pointing in the right direction. As the session ended and delegates began to disperse, Keeper Vextai approached Elena. "Ambassador," she said, "I've been studying your species more closely since the trial. I believe I understand now why the ancient warnings seem so contradictory." "Oh?" "Previous civilizations saw humanity's potential for both great good and terrible destruction. They couldn't predict which way you would go." Vextai's crystalline form brightened with what Elena had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of a smile. "But they failed to consider the most important factor, which is that humans don't choose between good and evil based on what's easy, or safe or logical. You choose based on what's right." Elena considered this as she looked out at the vast assembly chamber, filled with beings from across the galaxy who were still trying to understand humanity's place in their universe. "Keeper," she said finally, "I hope we can live up to that reputation." "Oh, Ambassador," Vextai replied, "I don't think you have a choice. It's simply what you are." As Elena made her way back to the human delegation's quarters, she passed a group of young beings from various species who were studying together. They looked up at her with a mixture of curiosity and awe that she was still getting used to. "Ambassador Vasquez," one of them called out, a young Zephyrian whose scales showed the blue-green of eagerness. "Is it true that humans never surrender?" Elena paused, considering the question carefully. "We surrender when surrender is the right thing to do," she said finally. "But we never give up on doing what's right." She left the youngsters to puzzle over that distinction as she continued toward her quarters, where reports from Earth awaited her attention. Humanity was preparing to take its place in galactic civilization, and there was much work to be done. Behind her, the ancient warning texts in the Zephyrian archive pulsed with gentle light, their prophecies finally understood not as threats, but as promises. The humans had come to the stars, just as predicted, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the depths of space, aboard ships carrying human names like Hope, Determination, and never give up, humanity's children began their journeys to distant worlds. They carried with them the same stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had defined their species since they first looked up at the stars and decided they belonged there. The ancient warnings had spoken truly. Humans were indeed unpredictable, impossible, and utterly unwilling to accept that some things couldn't be done. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes that was exactly what it needed. End of ancient warnings spoke of humans. No one believed them until it was late.